there's a moment that changes everything. It's the moment you realize that your constant availability isn't making people value you more, it's making them value you less. The moment you understand that saying yes to everything isn't making you indispensable, it's making you invisible. And the moment you discover that the people who respect you most are the ones who had to work hardest to get your attention. Today, you're going to learn why being available all the time is the fastest way to lose respect, influence, and personal power. And more importantly, you're going to discover how strategic unavailability can completely transform your relationships, your career, and your entire life. By the time you finish listening, you'll never look at availability the same way again. Chapter 1. The availability trap. That's destroying your value. Let me tell you something that no one wants to admit. The reason people don't respect you has nothing to do with your skills, your intelligence, or your character. It has everything to do with how available you make yourself. Right now, you're probably making yourself so available that you've become background noise in other people's lives. You answer texts immediately. You say yes to every request. You drop everything when someone needs you. And you think this makes you valuable. But here's the brutal truth. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. This isn't my opinion. This is psychology. This is economics. This is human nature. When something is abundant, it loses value. When something is scarce, it becomes precious. And right now, your time, your attention, and your energy are so abundant in other people's lives that they've stopped seeing them as valuable. Think about the most respected people you know. Think about the people whose opinions matter, whose presence commands attention, whose approval everyone seeks. Are these people constantly available? Do they answer every text within minutes? Do they say yes to every invitation? Absolutely not. They understand something you don't. That respect isn't earned through availability. It's earned through selective unavailability. They know that the people who chase them are the ones who respect them. They understand that the harder someone has to work for their attention, the more valuable that attention becomes. This is why successful CEOs don't answer their own phones. This is why influential people don't respond to every social media comment. This is why the most attractive people aren't always the ones trying hardest to please everyone. But you've been conditioned to believe the opposite. You've been taught that being helpful, responsive, and accommodating is the path to success. You've been told that saying no is selfish, that being unavailable is rude, that making yourself scarce is game playing. And because of these beliefs, you've created a life where everyone expects instant access to you, where your boundaries don't exist, and where your value is determined by how quickly you can serve other people's needs. The result? You feel exhausted, underappreciated, and invisible. You give and give and give. But the more you give, the more people expect. You make yourself available, but people only reach out when they need something. You prioritize others, but they don't prioritize you. This isn't coincidence. This is the inevitable result of the availability trap. When you're always there, people stop appreciating that you're there at all. When you're constantly accessible, accessing you becomes routine rather than special. When you never say no, your yes becomes meaningless. And here's what makes this even more frustrating. The very people you're trying to please by being available are the ones who respect you least. The person who texts you at midnight knows you'll respond. The colleague who dumps work on you knows you'll say yes. The friend who only calls when they need something knows you'll be there. They don't respect your time because you've taught them that your time isn't valuable. They don't appreciate your effort because you've made your effort feel effortless. They don't value your presence because you've made your presence feel guaranteed. This is the availability trap. The more you try to prove your worth through availability, the more you devalue yourself in other people's eyes. The more accessible you become, the less special your access feels. The more you accommodate others, the less they accommodate you. It's a vicious cycle that most people never escape, because they mistake being needed for being valued, being busy for being important, and being helpful for being respected. Chapter 2. The Psychology Behind Why Constant Availability Backfires. To understand why being constantly available destroys your value, you need to understand the psychological mechanisms that drive human behavior. And the first principle you need to grasp is this: humans don't value what they can easily obtain. This isn't a character flaw or a moral failing. This is hardwired into our psychology. It's called the scarcity principle, and it governs everything from economic markets to romantic relationships to workplace dynamics. When psychologists study what makes people desire something, they consistently find that perceived scarcity is one of the strongest drivers of value. The harder something is to get, the more people want it. The more limited something appears, the more precious it becomes. This is why limited edition products sell better than regular products. This is why exclusive clubs have waiting lists. This is why the most sought-after people are the ones who seem hardest to reach. But when you're constantly available, you're signaling infinite abundance. You're telling the world that your time is unlimited, your energy is endless, and your attention is free. And when something appears unlimited, free, and endless, our brains automatically categorize it as less valuable. Think about water. In most places, water is abundant and cheap, so we waste it without thinking. But in the desert, where water is scarce, every drop becomes precious. Your availability works the same way. There's another psychological principle at play. The principle of reciprocity. When you're always giving, always available, always accommodating, you create what psychologists call a reciprocity imbalance. Instead of creating gratitude, this imbalance creates discomfort in other people. They know they're getting more than they're giving. And instead of appreciating this, they start to devalue what you're providing to reduce their psychological discomfort. It's easier for their minds to believe that what you're giving isn't valuable than to feel guilty about not reciprocating. This is why people often treat their most giving friends the worst. It's why employees who always say yes get promoted less often than those who are selective about their commitments. It's why romantic partners who are always available often find themselves taken for granted. The constant availability doesn't create appreciation. It creates psychological pressure that people relieve by devaluing the source. Then there's the principle of effort justification. Humans value things more when they have to work for them. When someone has to wait for your response, navigate your schedule, or earn your attention, they automatically assign more value to the interaction. It's the same reason why fraternity hazing creates stronger bonds, why difficult video games are more engaging, and why exclusive restaurants with long wait times feel more special than empty ones. When you make yourself constantly available, you eliminate the effort required to access you. This doesn't just make you less valuable, it actually makes people enjoy interacting with you less. The psychological satisfaction of earning something is absent when that something is freely given. You're not just devaluing yourself, you're reducing the pleasure others get from your relationship. There's also the psychological concept of loss aversion. People fear losing something they have more than they desire, gaining something they don't have. When you're constantly available, people never experience the fear of losing access to you. They never have to worry that you might not be there. So they never develop the appreciation that comes from imagining life without your availability. It's only when something becomes scarce that people realize how much they value it. Consider the psychology of attention itself. Human attention is naturally drawn to what's rare, unexpected, and limited. This is why our ancestors survived. They paid attention to unusual sounds, rare movements, and limited opportunities. When you're constantly available, you become part of the background. Your presence becomes expected, routine, and therefore invisible to conscious attention. You fade into the psychological wallpaper of other people's lives. The final psychological principle is the concept of operant conditioning. When you always respond immediately, always say yes, and always accommodate others, you're training them to expect this behavior. You're conditioning them to take your availability for granted. They don't appreciate your responsiveness because you've made it predictable. They don't value your flexibility because you've made it routine. You've literally conditioned them to devalue you. Understanding these psychological mechanisms is crucial because it reveals that the problem isn't with the people who don't appreciate your availability. The problem is with the availability itself. You're fighting against fundamental human psychology, and psychology always wins. The solution isn't to try harder to get people to appreciate your constant availability. The solution is to stop being constantly available. Chapter 3. How Scarcity Creates Magnetic Attraction and Respect. Now that you understand why constant availability destroys value, let's explore the flip side. How strategic scarcity creates magnetic attraction and deep respect. Scarcity doesn't just make things more valuable. It makes them more desirable, more memorable, and more influential. When you learn to control your availability, you tap into one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Think about the people you respect most in your life. Not the people you like most. Not the people you're most comfortable with, but the people you genuinely respect. Chances are, these people aren't constantly available. They don't answer every call immediately. They don't say yes to every request. They have boundaries, standards, and priorities that come before accommodating others. And paradoxically, their selective unavailability is part of what makes you respect them. This is because scarcity creates what psychologists call the focusing illusion. When something is rare or limited, our minds focus on it more intensely. We think about it more, we value it more, and we remember it more vividly. When someone is selectively available, every interaction becomes more meaningful because it represents a choice they made to prioritize you in that moment. The conversation carries weight because you know this person could be doing something else, but they chose to give you their attention. Contrast this with someone who's always available. When they talk to you, there's no sense that you're special or chosen. You're simply the current recipient of their unlimited time. The interaction feels less meaningful because it required no sacrifice, no choice, no prioritization. It's the difference between receiving a gift from someone who carefully selected it just for you and receiving a mass-produced flyer that was handed to everyone. Scarcity also triggers what behavioral economists call the endowment effect. When people have to work for something, when they have to wait for it, when they have to earn it, they automatically assign it more value. This isn't rational. It's psychological. The effort invested becomes part of the perceived value. When someone has to schedule time with you, wait for your response, or earn your attention, they unconsciously inflate the value of that access because of the investment they made. This is why exclusive restaurants feel more special than chain restaurants, even when the food is comparable. This is why limited edition products create more desire than regular products, even when the features are identical. This is why people value advice more when they pay for it than when it's given for free. The scarcity itself becomes part of the value proposition. But scarcity creates more than just value. It creates respect. When you're selective about your availability, you communicate that your time has value, your energy has limits, and your attention is precious. You're essentially saying, I have important things to do, meaningful relationships to maintain, and personal boundaries that I respect. This sends a powerful message about your self-worth and your priorities. People respond to this message at a subconscious level. They begin to mirror the value you place on yourself. If you treat your time as precious, they start to see it as precious. If you respect your own boundaries, they start to respect them too. If you demonstrate that your attention is selective, they start to compete for it. You teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. And nothing teaches self-respect like selective availability. Scarcity also creates anticipation and excitement. When someone knows they can't access you immediately, when they have to wait for your response or work around your schedule, every interaction becomes an event rather than a routine. The anticipation builds value. The waiting creates appreciation. The effort required makes the payoff feel earned rather than given. This anticipation effect is so powerful that it changes the neurochemistry of human interaction. When people have to wait for something they want, their brains release dopamine not just when they get it, but during the anticipation period. This means that by being selectively available, you're literally creating more pleasure in other people's brains. You're making interactions with you more neurochemically rewarding. Moreover, scarcity creates what psychologists call the contrast principle. When most people are constantly available, being selectively unavailable makes you stand out dramatically. You become the exception in a world of unlimited access. You become memorable in a sea of forgettable interactions. You become respected in an environment where most people are taken for granted. The key insight is that scarcity isn't about being difficult or playing games. It's about having genuine priorities, real boundaries, and authentic self-respect. When your unavailability stems from the fact that you have important work to do, meaningful relationships to nurture, and personal goals to pursue, it communicates strength rather than manipulation. It shows that you have a life worth protecting rather than time to waste. This is the magnetic quality of selective availability. People are drawn to those who seem to have something important going on, who have standards worth maintaining, who have priorities worth protecting. They want to be part of whatever makes you unavailable to everyone else. They want to earn the access that others can't freely obtain. They want to be chosen rather than simply accommodated. Chapter 4. The relationship revolution that happens when you set boundaries. When you stop being constantly available and start setting real boundaries, something remarkable happens to your relationships. Not all of them improve immediately, and that's exactly the point. The relationships that were built on your over-availability will initially resist the change, while the relationships that were genuine will become stronger than ever. This process is like a filter that separates the people who value you from the people who were simply using you. Let's start with what happens to the users and takers in your life. These are the people who only reach out when they need something, who expect immediate responses to their non-urgent requests, who assume your time is always available for their convenience. When you start setting boundaries with these people, their reaction will tell you everything you need to know about the relationship. They'll become frustrated, demanding, or even angry. They'll accuse you of being selfish, unavailable, or difficult. They'll try to guilt-trip you back into your old patterns. This reaction isn't actually about you. It's about the fact that you've disrupted a system that was working in their favor. They had unlimited access to your time, energy, and resources. And now that access is being restricted. Their negative reaction is proof that they were taking advantage of your availability rather than genuinely valuing your relationship. A person who truly cares about you will respect your boundaries, not fight against them. Here's what's particularly revealing. The people who get most upset about your boundaries are usually the ones who give you the least in return. The colleague who dumps work on you but never helps with yours. The friend who calls when they need emotional support but disappears when you need theirs. The family member who expects you to be available for every request but never considers your schedule or priorities. These people aren't angry because they miss you. They're angry because they're losing a resource. But watch what happens to your genuine relationships when you start setting boundaries. The people who truly value you will initially be surprised by the change, but they'll quickly adapt and respect your new standards. They'll stop expecting immediate responses to every message. They'll start scheduling time with you instead of assuming you're always free. They'll become more intentional about their requests and more appreciative when you say yes. More importantly, these relationships will become deeper and more meaningful. When you're not constantly available, the time you do spend with people becomes more valuable. Conversations become more focused and intentional. Shared experiences feel more special because they required coordination and planning. The relationship shifts from convenience-based to choice-based, and choice-based relationships are always stronger. You'll also notice that people start bringing their best selves to interactions with you. When someone knows they have limited access to your attention, they're more likely to make that time count. They'll come prepared for conversations. They'll be more present during your time together. They'll invest more energy in maintaining the relationship because they can't take it for granted. Setting boundaries also changes how people communicate with you. Instead of sending multiple urgent messages about non-urgent matters, they'll consolidate their thoughts into more substantive communications. Instead of interrupting you throughout the day with random requests, they'll plan ahead and respect your schedule. Instead of assuming you'll figure out how to accommodate their needs, they'll start offering solutions and alternatives. Perhaps most importantly, boundaries transform the power dynamics in your relationships. When you're constantly available, other people control the terms of engagement. They decide when to contact you, what to ask of you, and how much of your time to consume. But when you have boundaries, you regain control over these decisions. You choose when to respond, what requests to accept, and how much energy to invest in each relationship. This shift in power dynamics doesn't make you controlling or manipulative. It makes you equal. Healthy relationships require balance, and constant availability creates imbalance. When you set boundaries, you're not taking power away from others. You're reclaiming power that should have been yours all along. You're establishing the mutual respect that healthy relationships require. The boundary-setting process also reveals your own patterns and preferences. You'll discover which types of requests drain your energy and which ones energize you. You'll learn which people inspire you to be generous with your time and which ones make you feel depleted. You'll identify the activities and commitments that align with your values and the ones that distract from your goals. This self-awareness allows you to become more strategic about your relationships. Instead of saying yes to everything and everyone equally, you can invest your best energy in the relationships that matter most. Instead of being equally available to all, you can prioritize the people who reciprocate your investment. Instead of treating all requests as equally important, you can focus on the ones that align with your priorities. The result is a relationship ecosystem that supports your goals rather than sabotaging them. You'll find yourself surrounded by people who respect your time, appreciate your energy, and contribute positively to your life. The relationships that survive your boundary-setting process will be the ones worth investing in, and the ones that don't survive probably weren't worth maintaining anyway. Chapter 5. Why successful people are strategically unreachable. If you study the most successful people in any field, you'll discover a pattern that might surprise you. They're not the most available people. They're the most strategically unreachable. They don't answer every email, take every meeting, or say yes to every opportunity. Instead, they've mastered the art of selective accessibility, and this mastery is a key factor in their success. This isn't about being rude or antisocial. It's about understanding that success requires focus, and focus requires the ability to say no to distractions. When you're constantly available, you're constantly distracted. Your attention is fragmented across dozens of conversations, requests, and interruptions. You're reactive rather than proactive, responsive rather than strategic. You spend your energy on other people's priorities instead of your own. Successful people understand that their availability is a finite resource that must be carefully allocated. They know that saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. They recognize that their time and attention are their most valuable assets, and they protect these assets with the same intensity that others protect their money or possessions. Consider how successful entrepreneurs manage their accessibility. They don't answer their own phones. They don't respond to emails immediately. They don't take meetings without clear agendas and defined outcomes. They delegate access management to assistants and gatekeepers. They batch communication into specific time blocks instead of allowing it to interrupt their work throughout the day. This isn't about being difficult. It's about being effective. The same principle applies to successful artists, athletes, and leaders in every field. They create barriers between themselves and constant interruption, not because they don't care about people, but because they understand that their ability to create value depends on sustained focus. They know that their best work happens during periods of deep concentration. And deep concentration is impossible when you're constantly available for interruption. But there's another dimension to strategic unreachability that's even more important. It creates what economists call signaling value. When someone is difficult to reach, it signals that their time is valuable and their attention is in demand. This signal creates a self-reinforcing cycle where perceived value becomes actual value. People assume that if someone is hard to reach, it's because they have important things to do, and many people competing for their attention. This signaling effect is so powerful that it influences how people approach the interaction before it even happens. When someone knows they have limited access to a successful person, they prepare more carefully for the interaction. They think through their questions more thoroughly. They make their communications more concise and focused. They bring their best ideas and most important concerns rather than wasting time on trivial matters. The result is that successful people have higher quality interactions. The conversations they do have are more substantive, more focused, and more valuable. They're not drowning in shallow communications because their strategic unreachability filters out everything except what's truly important. They spend their interaction time on meaningful exchanges rather than routine maintenance. Strategic unreachability also creates leverage in negotiations and business relationships. When someone is easy to reach and always available, they have little negotiating power. Their accessibility communicates that they need the interaction more than the other party does. But when someone is strategically unreachable, it suggests that they have alternatives and options. It implies that their participation in any interaction is a choice rather than a necessity. This leverage extends beyond formal business situations into every area of life. When you're strategically unreachable, people value your participation more in social situations. They appreciate your presence more in personal relationships. They respect your opinions more in group discussions. Your scarcity creates gravity that draws people toward you rather than taking you for granted. Successful people also understand the compound effect of strategic unreachability. Each time you maintain boundaries and protect your time, you reinforce your reputation as someone whose attention is valuable. Each time you say no to a low-priority request, you create space for a high-priority opportunity. Each time you delay a response to think through your answer, you provide more value when you do respond. This compound effect builds over time into what we might call selective magnetism. People begin to compete for your attention rather than expecting it freely. They start to offer value before making requests. They become more strategic about when and how they approach you. Your strategic unreachability trains others to bring their best to every interaction. The key insight is that success isn't just about working harder or being more talented. It's about being more selective about where you direct your energy and attention. Successful people aren't necessarily better at everything. They're better at choosing what to focus on and what to ignore. They're strategic about their availability because they understand that availability determines focus, and focus determines results. This is why the most successful people often seem to have more time rather than less. They're not busier, they're more focused. They're not working harder. They're working more selectively. They're not more available. They're more strategic about when and how they make themselves available. Their success gives them the luxury of choice, and they use that luxury to protect the very focus that created their success in the first place. Chapter 6. The mental shift from people pleaser to priority setter. The transition from constant availability to strategic scarcity isn't just about changing your behavior. It's about fundamentally rewiring your relationship with other people's expectations and your own self-worth. Most people who struggle with over-availability aren't just being nice. They're operating from a deep-seated belief that their value comes from how useful they are to others. This belief is not only wrong, it's destructive. And it's the first thing that needs to change. Let's address the core fear that drives constant availability. The fear that if you're not always accessible, people will stop needing you. And if they stop needing you, they'll stop valuing you. This fear creates a vicious cycle where you become addicted to being needed, even when being needed comes at the expense of being respected. You confuse dependency with appreciation, usefulness with importance, and availability with value. But here's what you need to understand. People don't respect what they can exploit. They don't value what they can take for granted. And they don't appreciate what costs them nothing. When you make yourself constantly available, you're not building relationships. You're enabling exploitation. You're not creating appreciation. You're fostering entitlement. You're not proving your worth. You're devaluing yourself. The mental shift begins with recognizing that your worth isn't determined by how much you give, but by how much you value what you have to give. Your time isn't valuable because other people say it is. It's valuable because you say it is. Your energy isn't precious because others treat it as precious. It's precious because you understand its finite nature. Your attention isn't a gift because people appreciate it. It's a gift because you choose to bestow it. This shift requires you to stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's opinions and reactions. When you're constantly available, you're essentially saying, "Please validate my worth by needing me." You're making your value dependent on external demand rather than internal recognition. This is not only emotionally exhausting, it's strategically foolish. You're giving others control over how you feel about yourself. The alternative is to become what psychologists call internally validated. This means deriving your sense of worth from your own standards, achievements, and values, rather than from other people's approval or need for your services. When you're internally validated, you don't need to be constantly available to feel valuable, because your value isn't dependent on constant validation. This internal validation creates what we might call confident unavailability. You're not unavailable because you're playing games or trying to manipulate others. You're unavailable because you have important things to do, meaningful goals to pursue, and personal standards to maintain. Your unavailability stems from abundance, not scarcity. You have so much value to create and protect that you can't afford to give it away indiscriminately. Part of this mental shift involves redefining what it means to be helpful. Most over-available people believe that being helpful means saying yes to every request and being accessible at all times. But true helpfulness often requires saying no to immediate requests so you can say yes to bigger opportunities. It means being strategically available so that when you are available, you can give your best rather than your leftovers. Consider this. When you're constantly available, you're often helping people with things they could figure out themselves. You're enabling learned helplessness rather than fostering independence. You're providing immediate solutions rather than teaching problem-solving skills. Your constant availability often makes people weaker, not stronger, because it removes the necessity for them to develop their own capabilities. Strategic unavailability, on the other hand, forces people to become more resourceful, independent, and thoughtful about their requests. When they know they can't immediately access your help, they'll try harder to solve problems themselves first. When they do reach out, they'll have already invested effort in understanding the problem, which makes your help more effective and their learning more complete. The mental shift also involves embracing what might feel like selfishness, but is actually self-respect. You need to become comfortable with prioritizing your own goals, protecting your own time, and valuing your own energy. This isn't selfishness. It's self-stewardship. You can't give from an empty well, and you can't help others effectively if you haven't taken care of yourself first. This self-respect communicates itself to others at a subconscious level. When you demonstrate that you value your time, others begin to value it too. When you show that you have standards and boundaries, others begin to respect those standards and boundaries. When you prove that you won't sacrifice your priorities for their convenience, they stop expecting you to do so. The final aspect of this mental shift involves changing your relationship with guilt. Over-available people often feel guilty when they can't immediately help someone or when they have to say no to a request. This guilt is based on the false belief that other people's needs should always come before your own priorities. But guilt about maintaining boundaries is usually misplaced responsibility. You're not responsible for solving everyone's problems, managing everyone's emotions, or being available for everyone's convenience. Learning to tolerate this guilt without immediately acting to relieve it is crucial. The guilt will fade as you realize that people are more capable and resilient than you assumed. They can wait for your response. They can find alternative solutions. They can respect your boundaries without falling apart. Your job isn't to shield others from all inconvenience. It's to provide genuine value when you choose to engage. This mental shift from people-pleaser to priority setter is perhaps the most challenging part of the transformation, but it's also the most important. Without this internal change, any behavioral modifications will feel artificial and unsustainable. But with this shift in place, strategic unavailability becomes natural, authentic, and powerful. Chapter 7. The Art of Saying No Without Guilt or Explanation. Saying no is one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal, but most people use it terribly. They over-explain, they apologize excessively, they offer elaborate justifications, and they leave the door open for negotiation. This approach not only weakens the impact of your no, but it actually invites people to argue with your decision, guilt-trip you into changing your mind, or push back against your boundaries. The art of saying no effectively begins with understanding that no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation for declining a request that doesn't align with your priorities, exceed your capacity, or conflict with your boundaries. When you over-explain your refusal, you're essentially saying that your decision is up for debate, that your priorities might be wrong, or that the other person has the right to judge your choices. This doesn't mean you should be rude or dismissive. It means you should be clear, confident, and final. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you move this weekend because I have this thing I need to do, and I know it might seem selfish, but I really need some time for myself, and I hope you understand." You say, "I won't be able to help you move this weekend. Period. End of discussion." The power in this approach comes from its clarity and finality. When you deliver a clean no without justification, you're communicating that this is a decision, not a negotiation. You're showing respect for the other person by not wasting their time with false hope or unclear boundaries. You're also showing respect for yourself by not apologizing for having priorities and limitations. One of the biggest mistakes people make when saying no is apologizing for things that don't require apologies. You don't need to apologize for having other commitments. You don't need to apologize for needing rest. You don't need to apologize for having financial limitations, time constraints, or personal boundaries. These are facts of life, not character flaws that require forgiveness. When you apologize for normal human limitations, you're training people to expect that you feel guilty about having boundaries, which makes them more likely to push against those boundaries in the future. They learn that if they apply enough pressure or make you feel guilty enough, you'll override your own limits to accommodate them. This is not a dynamic you want to create. Instead of apologizing, you can acknowledge their request and politely decline. I understand you need help with your project, but I'm not available to assist. This acknowledges that you heard them without suggesting that your unavailability is somehow wrong or unfortunate. It treats your boundaries as legitimate without implying that they're flexible or negotiable. Another critical aspect of effective refusal is timing. The faster you say no to requests that don't align with your priorities, the easier it becomes for everyone involved. When you delay saying no because you're hoping to find a way to say yes, or because you're afraid of disappointing someone, you create more problems than you solve. The person making the request continues planning around your potential participation, which makes your eventual refusal more disruptive and disappointing. Fast no's are kind no's. They give people time to find alternative solutions, make different plans, or adjust their expectations. They prevent the buildup of hope and expectation that makes eventual disappointment more painful. They also prevent you from spending mental energy on requests that you know you're going to decline anyway. The key to delivering fast no's is to check requests against your priorities immediately rather than promising to think about it when you already know the answer. If someone asks you to take on a commitment that you don't have time for, don't want to do, or can't afford, say no immediately. Don't say you'll get back to them unless you genuinely need time to check your calendar or consider the implications. You also need to resist the urge to soften your refusal with false hope or alternative offers. Don't say, "I can't do this, but maybe I could do something else," unless you actually want to do something else. Don't suggest that you might be available in the future unless you actually expect your situation to change. These hedges weaken your boundaries and create ongoing expectations that will require future no's. There will be times when people respond poorly to your refusal. They might get angry, disappointed, or pushy. They might accuse you of being selfish, unreasonable, or unhelpful. When this happens, remember that their reaction is information about their character, not about the validity of your boundaries. People who respect you will accept your no gracefully, even if they're disappointed. People who don't respect you will try to argue with, guilt trip, or manipulate you into changing your mind. These negative reactions are actually valuable because they help you identify the people in your life who see you as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. When someone can't accept your boundaries, they're revealing that they don't respect your autonomy, your judgment, or your right to make decisions about your own time and energy. The goal isn't to avoid all negative reactions to your boundaries. It's to maintain your boundaries regardless of how others react. You can acknowledge their disappointment without changing your decision. You can empathize with their situation without taking responsibility for solving it. You can remain kind and respectful while staying firm in your position. Mastering the art of saying no without guilt or explanation is liberating in ways that extend far beyond the specific requests you decline. It builds confidence in your own judgment, strengthens your sense of personal authority, and creates space for the opportunities and relationships that truly matter to you. Most importantly, it teaches others that your boundaries are real, which makes them less likely to test those boundaries in the future. Chapter 8. Dealing with pushback. When you start setting boundaries. When you begin implementing boundaries and becoming less available, you're going to face resistance. This isn't optional or avoidable. It's an inevitable part of the process. The people who have grown accustomed to unlimited access to your time, energy, and resources will not give up that access without a fight. Understanding this resistance and learning how to handle it effectively is crucial for successfully transforming your availability patterns. The first type of pushback you'll encounter is emotional manipulation. People will try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They'll tell you that you've changed, that you're not the person you used to be, that you're becoming selfish or cold. They'll remind you of times when they helped you, suggest that you owe them your availability, or imply that good people don't have the kinds of boundaries you're setting. This emotional manipulation works because it targets your deepest insecurities about setting boundaries. Most over-available people already feel guilty about saying no, and manipulators know exactly how to amplify that guilt. They'll use phrases like, "I can't believe you won't help me," or "You never used to be like this," or "I thought I could count on you." These statements are designed to make you feel like a bad person for having normal human limitations. The key to handling emotional manipulation is recognizing it for what it is: an attempt to control your behavior through induced guilt and shame. When someone tries to manipulate you emotionally, they're not actually addressing the substance of your boundary. They're trying to make you feel so bad about having the boundary that you'll abandon it to relieve the emotional discomfort. Your response to emotional manipulation should be calm, brief, and non-defensive. Don't try to justify your boundaries or prove that you're still a good person. Simply restate your position and refuse to engage with the manipulation. "I understand you're disappointed, but my decision stands." Don't apologize, don't explain, and don't allow yourself to be drawn into a debate about your character or your priorities. The second type of pushback is escalation. When gentle manipulation doesn't work, some people will increase the pressure. They'll make their requests more urgent, their needs more dramatic, or their emotional appeals more intense. They might claim that their situation is an emergency, that you're the only person who can help them, or that terrible consequences will result if you don't make yourself available. Escalation is a test of your boundary strength. The person is essentially asking, how much pressure does it take to get you to abandon your boundaries? If you give in to escalation, you're teaching them that boundaries are negotiable and that enough pressure will always overcome your limits. This encourages more escalation in the future and makes your boundaries effectively meaningless. The way to handle escalation is to remain calm and consistent, regardless of how dramatic the pressure becomes. Don't match their emotional intensity. Don't get drawn into arguments about the urgency or importance of their request. And don't feel obligated to solve problems that escalate after you've already declined to be involved. Your boundaries don't become invalid just because someone's situation becomes more dramatic. The third type of pushback is testing. Some people will probe your boundaries to see if they're real or just temporary. They'll make small requests that technically violate your boundaries but seem harmless or reasonable. They'll push deadlines, exceed agreed-upon limits, or ask for just this once exceptions. This testing behavior is designed to erode your boundaries gradually rather than challenging them directly. Testing is particularly dangerous because it can feel reasonable in the moment. The individual requests might seem small and harmless, but the cumulative effect is the complete erosion of your boundaries. If you allow testing behavior to succeed, you're communicating that your boundaries are guidelines rather than rules, and guidelines can always be negotiated or ignored. The way to handle testing is to enforce your boundaries consistently, even when violations seem minor or well-intentioned. This doesn't mean being harsh or punitive. It means being clear and consistent. If someone exceeds the response time you've established for emails, don't respond immediately just because they claim it's urgent. If someone asks for a small favor after you've established that you're not available for favors, decline just as clearly as you would decline a large request. The fourth type of pushback is replacement pressure. When you become less available to someone, they might try to make you feel responsible for finding alternative solutions to their needs. They'll ask you to recommend someone else who can help them, to connect them with resources, or to provide solutions, even if you can't provide direct assistance. While this might seem reasonable, it's often an attempt to maintain access to your time and mental energy even after you've declined to provide direct help. The key insight is that setting boundaries means you're not responsible for managing the consequences of those boundaries for other people. If someone needs help that you can't or won't provide, finding alternative solutions is their responsibility, not yours. You can choose to offer suggestions or connections if you want to, but you're not obligated to do so, and you shouldn't feel guilty if you don't. The final type of pushback is relationship threats. Some people will threaten to end or diminish the relationship if you don't return to your previous availability patterns. They'll say things like, "I guess our friendship doesn't mean as much to you as I thought," or, "If you can't be there for me, I don't know why we're even friends." These threats are designed to make you choose between your boundaries and your relationships. Relationship threats reveal the true nature of the connection. If someone is willing to end a relationship because you have boundaries, they weren't valuing the relationship itself. They were valuing what they could get from the relationship. This is painful to recognize, but it's also liberating. You're better off knowing where you stand than continuing a one-sided relationship that was never genuine. The most important thing to remember about pushback is that it's temporary. People will test your new boundaries, but if you remain consistent, they'll eventually accept the new reality. The relationships that survive your boundary-setting process will be stronger and more genuine than the ones that don't. And the respect you gain from standing firm will more than compensate for any temporary discomfort you experience during the transition. Chapter 9. Advanced Strategies for Becoming Selectively Accessible. Once you understand the principles of strategic unavailability and have begun setting basic boundaries, it's time to implement more sophisticated strategies for managing your accessibility. These advanced techniques will help you maximize the impact of your selective availability, while minimizing the friction and resistance that can come with dramatic changes in your interaction patterns. The first advanced strategy is time-blocking communication. Instead of responding to messages throughout the day as they arrive, designate specific time periods for checking and responding to emails, texts, and calls. This might mean checking email only at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m., or setting aside 1 hour in the morning for returning calls. During your non-communication blocks, resist the urge to check messages or respond to notifications. Time-blocking communication serves multiple purposes. It protects your focused work time from constant interruption. It batches similar tasks together for increased efficiency. And it trains others that immediate responses aren't available or necessary. When people know you don't respond to messages immediately, they stop expecting immediate responses, which reduces pressure on both sides of the interaction. To implement time blocking effectively, you need to communicate your communication schedule to the important people in your life. Let colleagues know that you check email 3 times daily and that urgent matters should be communicated through a different channel. Tell friends that you typically respond to texts in the evening rather than throughout the day. Set up an autoresponder that lets people know when they can expect a response and what constitutes a true emergency. The second advanced strategy is differential availability. This means being more accessible to some people than others based on the value and nature of your relationships. Your most important relationships might have access to multiple communication channels and faster response times, while casual acquaintances might only have access to email with longer response windows. Differential availability recognizes that not all relationships are equal and that your time and attention are finite resources that should be allocated strategically. Your romantic partner, close family members, and key business relationships deserve more accessibility than random acquaintances, casual friends, or people who only contact you when they need something. To implement differential availability, create categories for your relationships and establish different communication protocols for each category. High-priority people might have your phone number and can expect same-day responses. Medium-priority people might have email access with 24 to 48-hour response times. Low-priority people might only have access through social media or professional platforms with even longer response windows. The third strategy is scheduled accessibility. Instead of being randomly available whenever someone wants your time, create specific periods when you're accessible for meetings, calls, or extended conversations. This might mean designating Tuesday and Thursday mornings for meetings, Monday evenings for catching up with friends, or Sunday afternoons for family time. Scheduled accessibility forces people to plan ahead if they want access to your time, which makes them more intentional about how they use that time. It also gives you control over when interactions happen, allowing you to group similar activities together and protect your most productive hours for focused work. When implementing scheduled accessibility, be specific about the types of interactions that fit into each scheduled period. Office hours might be for work-related discussions, social time might be for casual conversations, and family time might be protected from outside interruptions. Having clear purposes for each accessibility window helps people understand how to use your time appropriately. The fourth strategy is value-based filtering. This involves evaluating requests and opportunities based on their alignment with your goals, values, and priorities, rather than simply responding to whoever asks loudest or most persistently. Before saying yes to any significant request, ask yourself whether this opportunity moves you closer to your goals, whether it aligns with your values, and whether it's worth the time and energy investment. Value-based filtering requires you to be clear about your own priorities and goals. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve or what matters most to you, you can't effectively filter opportunities based on value. Take time to define your short-term and long-term objectives, identify your core values, and clarify what success looks like in different areas of your life. The fifth strategy is graduated responses. Instead of treating all communications as equally urgent, develop different response protocols based on the nature and importance of the message. Simple yes. No questions might get immediate brief responses. Complex discussions might be scheduled for dedicated time, and non-urgent requests might be bundled together for batch processing. Graduated responses allow you to be selectively responsive without being completely unresponsive. People get the level of attention their requests deserve, which feels fair and reasonable, while still protecting your time and energy. Emergency situations get immediate attention. Important matters get timely responses, and routine communications get appropriate but not excessive attention. The sixth strategy is attention currency. Start thinking of your attention as a valuable currency that should be spent deliberately rather than freely. When someone asks for your time or energy, consider what you're getting in return. Are they offering value, reciprocity, or mutual benefit? Or are they simply expecting you to give without receiving anything meaningful in return? This doesn't mean every interaction should be transactional, but it does mean being aware of the balance in your relationships and communications. People who consistently ask without giving, who drain your energy without providing value, or who expect unlimited access without respecting your boundaries, are poor investments of your attention currency. The final advanced strategy is strategic presence. When you do make yourself available, be fully present and engaged. Put away distractions, give your complete attention, and make the interaction valuable for both parties. This quality over quantity approach makes your limited availability more impactful and satisfying. Strategic presence ensures that when people do get access to your time, they have a positive experience that justifies the effort required to obtain that access. It reinforces the value of your attention and makes people more respectful of your boundaries because they understand that your availability, while limited, is high quality and worthwhile. Chapter 10. The power shift that changes everything in your career. Your career success is directly linked to how you manage your professional availability. The way you respond to requests, manage your time, and set boundaries at work determines not just your productivity, but your perceived value, advancement opportunities, and overall professional trajectory. When you master strategic unavailability in your career, you don't just become more effective, you become more respected, more influential, and more valuable to your organization. The biggest mistake most professionals make is confusing being busy with being productive, and confusing being available with being valuable. They answer every email immediately, say yes to every meeting request, and make themselves constantly accessible to colleagues and supervisors. They believe this demonstrates dedication, helpfulness, and commitment. But what it actually demonstrates is poor prioritization, lack of boundaries, and an inability to distinguish between urgent and important tasks. Think about the most successful people in your industry or organization. Are they the ones who respond to emails at midnight, attend every possible meeting, and make themselves available for every request? Or are they the ones who are selective about their commitments, strategic about their time allocation, and protective of their focus? The answer reveals a fundamental truth about professional success. Value comes from the results you create, not from the time you spend being accessible. When you're constantly available at work, you become what organizational psychologists call a go-to person, for all the wrong reasons. Instead of being sought out for your expertise, judgment, or strategic thinking, you become the default option for tasks that others don't want to handle. You get the overflow work, the last-minute requests, and the time-consuming projects that don't advance your career. Your availability makes you useful, but it doesn't make you valuable. Strategic unavailability in your career begins with understanding the difference between reactive and proactive work. Reactive work responds to other people's priorities, deadlines, and emergencies. Proactive work advances your own goals, develops your skills, and creates value for your organization. When you're constantly available, your day fills up with reactive work, leaving little time for the proactive activities that actually drive career advancement. The most successful professionals protect significant portions of their time for proactive work. They block calendar time for strategic thinking, skill development, and project advancement. They don't allow these blocks to be interrupted by non-urgent requests or meetings that could be emails. They understand that saying no to immediate availability allows them to say yes to long-term career growth. This protection of proactive time requires you to become comfortable with delayed responses and strategic inaccessibility. When someone sends you a non-urgent email, you don't need to respond within the hour. When someone wants to schedule a meeting that doesn't align with your priorities, you don't need to immediately accommodate their preferred time. When someone has a problem that isn't actually your responsibility, you don't need to drop everything to help solve it. Setting these boundaries at work will initially create some resistance. Colleagues who are accustomed to immediate access to your time will push back when that access becomes limited. Supervisors who have relied on your constant availability might question your commitment or dedication. But this resistance is temporary, and it's far outweighed by the respect and influence you gain from demonstrating that your time has value. One of the most powerful career applications of strategic unavailability is in meeting management. Most professionals attend far too many meetings, most of which are poorly planned, inefficiently run, and ultimately unproductive. When you become selective about which meetings you attend, you're not just protecting your time, you're signaling that your presence has value and that you're strategic about how you invest your energy. Before accepting any meeting request, ask 3 questions. Is my presence essential to the meeting's success? Will this meeting advance my goals or the organization's priorities? Is this the best use of my time compared to other available options? If you can't answer yes to at least 2 of these questions, decline the meeting or delegate your attendance to someone else. When you do attend meetings, make your presence count. Come prepared, contribute meaningfully, and help drive the discussion toward actionable outcomes. This quality over quantity approach makes people more thoughtful about when they include you in meetings because they know you'll add value when you're there. Strategic unavailability also applies to how you handle requests and assignments. When someone asks you to take on additional work, don't automatically say yes. Instead, ask about priorities, deadlines, and resource allocation. If taking on the new work would compromise your existing commitments or prevent you from focusing on high-impact activities, negotiate alternatives or decline the request. This doesn't mean being uncooperative or unhelpful. It means being strategic about how you deploy your skills and energy. When you're selective about the projects you take on, you can invest more thoroughly in the ones you accept, delivering higher quality results that enhance your reputation and advance your career. The key insight is that career advancement comes from being known for excellence in specific areas, not from being available for everything. When you spread yourself too thin by saying yes to every request, you become a generalist who's competent at many things, but exceptional at nothing. When you focus your energy strategically, you develop deep expertise and strong results in the areas that matter most. This focus requires you to identify your highest value activities and protect time for them ruthlessly. These might include developing new skills, building key relationships, working on strategic projects, or creating innovative solutions to important problems. Whatever they are, they should take priority over routine tasks, administrative work, or requests that don't advance your goals. The transformation in your career that results from strategic unavailability is profound. You'll find that people start coming to you for more important and interesting work because they know you'll give it the attention it deserves. You'll be included in higher-level discussions because your input is seen as valuable rather than routine. You'll have more opportunities for advancement because you'll have time to pursue them and the reputation to deserve them. Most importantly, you'll gain control over your professional destiny. Instead of being reactive to whatever comes your way, you'll be proactive about creating the career you want. Instead of being available for everything, you'll be strategic about what matters. And instead of being busy without purpose, you'll be focused with intention. Chapter 11. How strategic unavailability transforms your personal life. The transformation that occurs in your personal life when you master strategic unavailability is nothing short of revolutionary. Your friendships become deeper and more meaningful. Your romantic relationships become more passionate and respectful. Your family dynamics shift from exploitation to appreciation. And perhaps most importantly, you reclaim your personal time and energy for the activities, goals, and relationships that truly matter to you. Let's start with friendships, because this is where the change is often most dramatic and revealing. When you stop being constantly available to friends, you quickly discover which friendships were built on genuine connection and which were built on convenience. The friends who only contacted you when they needed something, who expected you to be available for their drama, but were never there for your important moments, who took your time and energy for granted, will often fade away when you set boundaries. This isn't a loss, it's a liberation. These weren't real friendships anyway. They were one-sided relationships where you were providing emotional labor, practical help, and constant availability in exchange for the illusion of connection. When you stop providing unlimited access to your time and energy, these pseudo-friends reveal their true nature by disappearing or becoming hostile about your new boundaries. But the friends who truly value you will respond differently. They'll initially be surprised by your new boundaries, but they'll quickly adapt and respect them. They'll stop expecting immediate responses to every text. They'll start planning social activities in advance. Instead of assuming you're always free, they'll become more intentional about your time together and more appreciative when you do spend time with them. More importantly, these genuine friendships will become deeper and more satisfying. When you're not constantly available, the time you do spend with friends becomes more precious and focused. Instead of scattered, interrupted conversations. You'll have meaningful exchanges. Instead of being the default option for every social activity, you'll be chosen for experiences that matter. Instead of feeling drained by one-sided relationships, you'll feel energized by mutual appreciation and respect. Strategic unavailability also transforms your romantic relationships in profound ways. If you're single, it makes you far more attractive to potential partners. People are naturally drawn to those who seem to have rich, full lives that can't be easily accessed or controlled. When you're not constantly available, you communicate that you have standards, priorities, and a sense of self-worth that goes beyond any individual relationship. This creates what psychologists call pre-selection value. When someone has to work to get your attention, when they have to earn your time, when they have to compete with your other priorities, they automatically assign more value to the relationship. You become a prize to be won rather than a resource to be consumed. The effort required to access you becomes part of your appeal. If you're already in a relationship, strategic unavailability can revitalize dynamics that may have become stagnant or taken for granted. When you stop being constantly available to your partner, when you maintain your own interests and friendships, when you preserve time for your personal goals, you become more interesting and attractive. You bring fresh energy and experiences to the relationship. Instead of making the relationship your entire world, this doesn't mean being distant or unavailable to your partner. It means maintaining the individual identity and personal boundaries that made you attractive in the first place. It means not dropping everything for every request, not sacrificing all your personal time for couple time, and not losing yourself in the relationship. Paradoxically, this strategic unavailability often makes partners more attentive, appreciative, and invested in the relationship. Family relationships are often where strategic unavailability faces the strongest resistance, because family members are the most likely to feel entitled to unlimited access to your time and energy. They'll use guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation to try to maintain their previous level of access to your availability. They'll remind you of family loyalty, childhood dynamics, or past favors to try to override your new boundaries. But family boundaries are often the most important ones to establish, because family relationships can be the most draining and exploitative if left unchecked. The family member who calls every day with drama, who expects you to drop everything for their emergencies, who guilt-trips you into saying yes to every request can consume enormous amounts of your time and energy if you let them. When you set boundaries with family members, you're not rejecting the relationship. You're making it healthier and more sustainable. You're teaching them that you're a person with your own life, priorities, and limitations, not just a resource for their convenience. The family members who truly care about you will ultimately respect these boundaries, even if they initially resist them. Strategic unavailability also transforms your relationship with yourself and your personal time. When you stop giving your time away indiscriminately, you suddenly have space for the activities, interests, and goals that make life meaningful. You can pursue hobbies that energize you, work on projects that matter to you, and invest in personal growth that makes you more interesting and capable. This reclaimed time often reveals interests and capabilities that were dormant while you were constantly available to others. You might discover artistic talents, intellectual curiosities, or physical capabilities that were buried under layers of other people's demands. You might reconnect with dreams and goals that were forgotten in the chaos of constant availability. The personal transformation that results from strategic unavailability creates a positive feedback loop. As you become more interesting, capable, and self-directed, you become more attractive to others. As you demonstrate self-respect and personal boundaries, others begin to treat you with more respect. As you invest in your own growth and goals, you become someone worth knowing and spending time with. This transformation also changes how you view and approach new relationships. Instead of desperately seeking approval and validation from others, you become selective about who you allow into your life. Instead of saying yes to every social opportunity, you choose the activities and people that align with your values and goals. Instead of being needy and available, you become choosy and valuable. The ultimate result is a personal life that reflects your priorities, supports your goals, and energizes you rather than draining you. Your relationships become sources of mutual enrichment rather than one-sided exploitation. Your time becomes your own to invest in what matters most to you, and your sense of self-worth becomes internally generated rather than dependent on other people's approval or need for your services. This personal transformation is perhaps the most rewarding aspect of mastering strategic unavailability, because it affects every area of your life. When your personal relationships are healthy and your personal time is protected, you have the foundation you need to succeed in every other area of life. Chapter 12. The compound effect of protecting your time and energy. The benefits of strategic unavailability don't just add up, they multiply. Every boundary you maintain, every no you deliver, every moment you protect your time and energy creates compound returns that grow exponentially over time. This compound effect is why some people seem to accomplish extraordinary things, while others, despite working just as hard, struggle to make meaningful progress toward their goals. Think of your time and energy as investment capital. When you're constantly available, you're essentially giving away this capital for free, with no expectation of return. You're making countless micro-investments in other people's priorities, emergencies, and convenience. But you're not accumulating any compound returns for yourself. At the end of each day, week, or year, you have little to show for all the time and energy you've expended. But when you become strategically unavailable, you start investing your time and energy in activities and relationships that generate returns. You focus on developing skills that increase your capabilities. You invest in relationships that are mutually beneficial. You work on projects that build toward larger goals. Each of these investments generates returns that can be reinvested, creating a compound effect that accelerates your progress. The first area where you'll notice compound returns is in skill development. When you protect time for learning and practice, instead of giving it away to constant interruptions and requests, you develop expertise faster and more thoroughly. The skills you build in year 1 become the foundation for more advanced capabilities in year 2. The knowledge you accumulate compounds, making future learning easier and more effective. This compound learning effect is why successful people often seem to acquire new skills and knowledge at an accelerating pace. It's not that they're necessarily smarter or more talented. It's that they've protected their learning time from the constant demands that prevent most people from developing deep expertise in anything. They understand that saying no to immediate requests allows them to say yes to long-term capability building. The compound effect also applies to relationships and networking. When you're selective about your social and professional interactions, you can invest more deeply in the relationships that matter most. These deeper relationships generate more opportunities referrals, and collaborations than dozens of shallow connections ever could. The time you save by not maintaining every casual acquaintance can be invested in building stronger bonds with the people who can truly impact your life and career. Quality relationships compound in ways that quantity relationships never can. A single strong relationship can lead to multiple opportunities, introductions to other valuable connections, and ongoing collaboration that generates results for years. But these compound relationship returns only happen when you invest the time and energy needed to build real depth and mutual value. Strategic unavailability also creates compound returns in terms of reputation and influence. Each time you demonstrate that your time is valuable, that your attention is selective, and that your commitments are meaningful, you build a reputation for being someone worth knowing and working with. This reputation creates what economists call signaling value, where your perceived worth increases your actual worth. This reputation compounds over time, making it easier to access better opportunities, attract higher quality relationships, and command more respect in your interactions. People begin to compete for your attention rather than taking it for granted. They bring better opportunities to you rather than expecting you to be grateful for whatever they offer. They treat your input as valuable rather than routine. The compound effect is particularly powerful in creative and entrepreneurial endeavors. When you protect large blocks of uninterrupted time for deep work, you can tackle complex projects that require sustained focus and creativity. These projects often generate disproportionate returns compared to the scattered, reactive work that fills most people's days. A single creative project completed during protected time might generate more value than dozens of small tasks completed while constantly interrupted. A business idea developed during focused thinking time might create more wealth than years of reactive busyness. A skill mastered during dedicated practice time might open career opportunities that were previously impossible. This is why the most successful creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders are often obsessive about protecting their time and attention. They understand that their biggest breakthroughs and most valuable contributions come from sustained focus on important projects, not from being constantly available for everyone else's priorities. The compound effect also applies to personal well-being and life satisfaction. When you stop depleting your energy through constant availability and start investing it in activities that energize and fulfill you, you create an upward spiral of well-being. You have more energy for the things that matter to you, which makes you more capable and motivated, which leads to better results and more satisfaction. Contrast this with the downward spiral that results from constant availability. You deplete your energy on other people's priorities, leaving you exhausted and resentful. You make little progress on your own goals, which makes you feel unsuccessful and unfulfilled. You maintain relationships that drain you rather than energize you, which makes you feel isolated, despite being constantly busy with social obligations. The compound effect of strategic unavailability takes time to build, which is why many people abandon it before they see the full benefits. The immediate costs are obvious. Some people will be disappointed. Some requests will go unfulfilled. Some opportunities will be missed. But the long-term benefits are exponential. Better relationships, higher achievement, greater satisfaction, and more control over your life's direction. Understanding this compound effect is crucial for maintaining strategic unavailability during the difficult transition period. When you're tempted to return to old patterns of constant availability, remember that you're not just choosing between saying yes or no to a single request. You're choosing between two completely different life trajectories. One where your time and energy are constantly dispersed without generating compound returns, and one where they're strategically invested to create exponential improvements in every area of your life. The key insight is that time and energy are finite resources that must be invested wisely to generate maximum returns. Strategic unavailability isn't about being difficult or antisocial. It's about being strategic with your most precious resources so that they compound into a life of greater capability, influence, satisfaction, and success. Chapter 13. The common mistakes that sabotage your boundary setting efforts. Even when people understand the importance of strategic unavailability and commit to setting boundaries, they often make critical mistakes that undermine their efforts. These mistakes are so common and so destructive that they deserve careful examination. Learning to recognize and avoid these pitfalls is essential for successfully transforming your availability patterns and maintaining the boundaries that protect your time and energy. The first major mistake is inconsistent boundary enforcement. People set boundaries with good intentions, but then make exceptions so frequently that the boundaries become meaningless. They say they won't respond to emails after 8 p.m., but then answer just this one urgent message. They establish that Sundays are for personal time, but then agree to just this one small favor. They decide they won't attend unnecessary meetings, but then attend one because it might be important. Each exception you make doesn't just affect that specific situation. It trains people to expect that your boundaries are negotiable. When you enforce a boundary 9 times but make an exception on the 10th, people learn that enough pressure, the right circumstances, or the perfect guilt trip can override your limits. This encourages them to push against your boundaries more aggressively and more frequently. Consistent boundary enforcement requires you to treat your boundaries as rules rather than guidelines. Rules have clear consequences that are applied every time they're violated, regardless of the circumstances or who's involved. Guidelines, on the other hand, are suggestions that can be bent or ignored when it seems convenient or reasonable. The second mistake is over-explaining your boundaries. When people challenge your boundaries, there's a natural temptation to justify your position with elaborate explanations. You want to help them understand that your boundaries are reasonable, that you're not being arbitrary or selfish, and that you have legitimate reasons for your limits. But over-explanation actually weakens your boundaries by suggesting that they're up for debate. When you explain your boundaries extensively, you're implicitly saying that your boundaries are only valid if the other person agrees with your reasoning. You're making your boundaries dependent on their approval rather than your own judgment. This opens the door for them to argue with your reasoning, challenge your priorities, or pressure you to make exceptions based on their assessment of your situation. Effective boundaries are stated simply and enforced consistently without extensive justification. I don't check emails after 8 p.m. is a boundary. I don't check emails after 8 p.m. because I need time to unwind and spend with my family, and I find that work emails stress me out, and I read that it's important to have work-life balance, and I hope you understand, is an invitation to negotiate. The third mistake is boundary creep, where you gradually allow small violations that eventually erode your boundaries completely. Someone asks you to respond to just one quick email during your protected time. Someone requests just 5 minutes of your attention during your focused work period. Someone wants just a small favor after you've established that you're not available for favors. These small violations seem harmless individually, but they compound into complete boundary collapse. The person who gets 5 minutes of your time will soon want 10 minutes, then 15, then an hour. The one quick email becomes a rapid-fire exchange that consumes your entire evening. The small favor becomes the first in a series of increasingly large requests. Boundary creep is particularly dangerous because it happens gradually, making it easy to rationalize each individual violation as reasonable or harmless. You don't notice that your boundaries have disappeared until you're back to your old patterns of constant availability and energy depletion. The fourth mistake is emotional boundary enforcement. When people violate your boundaries, there's often an emotional reaction: frustration, anger, resentment, or hurt. Some people express these emotions dramatically when enforcing their boundaries, turning every boundary violation into an emotional confrontation. This approach makes boundary enforcement feel like punishment rather than simple limit setting. Emotional boundary enforcement often backfires because it makes the boundary violation seem more significant than the boundary itself. People focus on your emotional reaction rather than the boundary that was violated. They might apologize for making you angry while completely ignoring the fact that they overstepped your clearly stated limits. Effective boundary enforcement is calm, consistent, and matter-of-fact. You're not angry that someone tested your boundary. You're simply maintaining your stated position. You're not punishing them for pushing against your limits. You're just not allowing those limits to be crossed. The boundary enforcement should feel inevitable rather than emotional. The fifth mistake is delayed boundary setting. Many people wait until they're overwhelmed, resentful, or exhausted before setting boundaries. They suffer through months or years of constant availability, hoping that things will improve naturally, before finally deciding that boundaries are necessary. By this time, the patterns of exploitation are deeply established, and the boundary setting feels sudden and dramatic to everyone involved. Late boundary setting is much more difficult than early boundary setting because you're trying to change established patterns rather than preventing problematic patterns from developing. The people who have grown accustomed to unlimited access to your time and energy will resist the change more strongly because they're losing something they've come to expect and depend on. The most effective approach is to set boundaries early and proactively, before problems develop. When you start a new job, begin a new relationship, or enter a new social situation, establish your availability patterns and limits from the beginning. This prevents exploitation patterns from developing and makes your boundaries feel natural rather than reactive. The sixth mistake is boundary negotiation. When people push back against your boundaries, some individuals try to find compromises or alternatives that make everyone happy. They negotiate different time frames, alternative arrangements, or modified versions of their original boundaries. While this seems reasonable and accommodating, it often leads to boundary erosion and continued pushing from others. Boundary negotiation sends the message that your boundaries are starting points for discussion rather than final positions. It encourages people to challenge your boundaries because they learn that pushing back often results in getting at least some of what they want. Over time, your boundaries shift further and further from your original position as you make concession after concession. Effective boundaries are non-negotiable. They're decisions you've made about how you want to allocate your time and energy, not opening positions in a negotiation. You can be flexible about how you interact within your boundaries, but the boundaries themselves should remain firm and consistent. The seventh and final major mistake is perfectionist boundary setting. Some people try to establish comprehensive boundary systems immediately, covering every possible situation and interaction. They create complex rules and protocols that are difficult to remember, explain, and maintain. When they inevitably fail to maintain these elaborate systems perfectly, they abandon boundary setting altogether. Effective boundary setting starts simple and evolves gradually. Begin with 1 or 2 clear, important boundaries that address your biggest availability problems. Master these basic boundaries before adding additional complexity. Build your boundary setting muscles with manageable limits before attempting more sophisticated systems. Avoiding these common mistakes is crucial for successfully implementing strategic unavailability. Each mistake undermines your efforts in different ways, but all of them share a common thread. They make your boundaries feel uncertain, negotiable, or temporary rather than clear, consistent, and permanent. Understanding these pitfalls and actively avoiding them will dramatically increase your success in protecting your time, energy, and priorities. Chapter 14. Building your new identity as someone who values their time. The most profound transformation that occurs when you master strategic unavailability isn't just behavioral, it's identity-based. You shift from seeing yourself as someone who must be constantly available to prove their worth to seeing yourself as someone whose time and energy are inherently valuable. This identity shift is crucial because behavior flows from identity. When you truly believe that your time is precious, protecting it becomes natural rather than forced. Most people who struggle with constant availability operate from what psychologists call an external locus of control. They believe that their worth comes from how others perceive them. Their value comes from how much they give to others, and their importance comes from how much others need them. This external validation dependency makes it almost impossible to maintain boundaries, because every no feels like a rejection of the relationship and a diminishment of their own worth. Building a new identity around valuing your time requires shifting to an internal locus of control. This means recognizing that your worth is inherent, your value is self-determined, and your importance comes from your own standards and achievements, rather than from other people's approval or dependency. This internal validation makes boundary setting feel like self-respect rather than selfishness. The first step in this identity transformation is developing what we might call time consciousness. This means becoming acutely aware of how you spend your time and what that time could otherwise be used for. Most people are unconscious about their time allocation. They say yes to requests without considering the opportunity cost. They spend hours on activities that don't align with their goals without recognizing the trade-offs they're making. Time consciousness involves recognizing that every yes to one thing is a no to something else. When you agree to attend an unnecessary meeting, you're saying no to focused work on an important project. When you spend an hour listening to someone complain about problems they don't want to solve, you're saying no to an hour of personal development or relationship building with people who energize you. Developing this consciousness makes the cost of constant availability painfully obvious. You begin to see how much potential you're sacrificing every time you make yourself indiscriminately available. You start to feel the weight of all the opportunities you're missing, the goals you're not pursuing, and the experiences you're not having, because your time is constantly consumed by other people's priorities. The second aspect of identity transformation is developing what successful people call time sovereignty. This means recognizing that you are the ultimate authority over how your time is used. You don't need permission to protect your time. You don't need justification for having priorities. You don't need approval for setting boundaries. Your time belongs to you, and you have not just the right, but the responsibility to use it wisely. Time sovereignty requires you to stop apologizing for normal human limitations. You don't need to apologize for not being available 24/7. You don't need to feel guilty for having other priorities. You don't need to justify why you can't do everything for everyone. These limitations aren't character flaws. They're the natural constraints that force you to make choices about what matters most. This sovereignty also means taking responsibility for the consequences of your availability patterns. If you're constantly exhausted, overwhelmed, and behind on your own goals, those aren't things that are happening to you. They're the results of choices you're making about how to allocate your time and energy. Taking ownership of these outcomes is empowering because it means you have the power to change them. The third element of identity transformation is developing high-value thinking. This means consistently asking yourself whether activities, requests, and opportunities align with your highest priorities and best uses of time. High-value thinking doesn't mean being selfish or antisocial. It means being strategic about where you invest your finite resources. People with high-value thinking approach requests differently. Instead of automatically saying yes and figuring out the logistics later, they evaluate whether the request deserves their time investment. They consider not just whether they can do something, but whether they should do it given their other priorities and opportunities. This evaluation process becomes automatic over time. You develop internal filters that quickly assess whether opportunities are worth your investment. You become skilled at identifying requests that would drain your energy without providing meaningful value to you or the other person. You learn to distinguish between activities that advance your goals and activities that simply consume your time. The fourth aspect of this identity shift is embracing what we might call selective excellence. Instead of trying to be good at everything and available for everyone, you focus on being exceptional in the areas that matter most to you. This requires saying no to many good opportunities so you can say yes to the best ones. Selective excellence means recognizing that you can't do everything well, but you can do some things exceptionally well if you focus your energy strategically. It means choosing to be outstanding in a few areas rather than mediocre in many areas. It means accepting that some people will be disappointed by your unavailability so that the people who matter most can benefit from your best work and attention. This identity shift also involves changing your relationship with productivity and achievement. Instead of measuring your worth by how busy you are or how many requests you fulfill, you start measuring your worth by the quality of your results and the impact of your choices. You focus on outcomes rather than activities, effectiveness rather than effort. The final element of building your new identity is developing what successful people call boundary confidence. This means feeling completely comfortable with your limits and expressing them clearly and consistently. When you have boundary confidence, you don't feel guilty about saying no. You don't over-explain your decisions, and you don't apologize for having standards. Boundary confidence comes from alignment between your values, your identity, and your actions. When you truly believe that your time is valuable, when you're clear about your priorities, and when you're committed to protecting what matters most to you, setting boundaries feels natural and right rather than difficult and guilt-inducing. This confidence is visible to others and changes how they interact with you. People sense when someone has genuine boundary confidence, and they naturally treat that person's time with more respect. They're less likely to make unreasonable requests, more likely to accept no for an answer, and more appreciative when they do receive access to your time and attention. Building this new identity takes time and practice. You'll have moments when you slip back into old patterns of over-availability and external validation seeking. But each time you choose to protect your time, each boundary you maintain, and each time you prioritize your own goals, you strengthen this new identity. Over time, valuing your time becomes so natural that constant availability seems absurd rather than noble. The ultimate goal is to reach a point where protecting your time feels like self-respect rather than selfishness, where saying no feels like good judgment rather than unkindness, and where your availability is seen by others as a privilege to be earned rather than a right to be assumed. When you reach this point, strategic unavailability isn't something you have to work to maintain. It's simply who you are. Chapter 15. Your complete transformation and the life you'll create. We've reached the culmination of your journey, from constant availability to strategic scarcity, from people-pleaser to priority setter, from someone whose time was taken for granted to someone whose attention is genuinely valued. The transformation you're about to complete will touch every aspect of your life, creating a ripple effect of positive changes that will compound for years to come. This final chapter is about integrating everything you've learned and stepping fully into your new identity as someone who commands respect through strategic unavailability. The first thing to understand about your complete transformation is that it's not just about changing how you respond to other people's requests. It's about fundamentally altering the dynamic of how people approach you in the first place. When you consistently demonstrate that your time is valuable, that your attention is selective, and that your availability must be earned, people begin to treat you differently before they even make requests. They become more thoughtful about when and how they contact you. They prepare more carefully for interactions with you. They present their requests more clearly and concisely. They offer value before asking for favors. They respect your time boundaries without being reminded. This shift in how others approach you eliminates many of the situations that previously required you to say no, because people stop making inappropriate or poorly timed requests in the first place. This change in how people interact with you creates what we might call a respect multiplier effect. As more people learn to approach you with appropriate respect for your time and boundaries, others observe this pattern and begin to model the same behavior. Your reputation as someone whose time is valuable spreads through your social and professional networks, creating an environment where respect for your availability becomes the norm rather than the exception. The second aspect of your complete transformation is the emergence of what successful people call selective magnetism. When you're strategically unavailable, when you have clear boundaries, and when you demonstrate genuine value through your selective availability, you become more attractive to exactly the kinds of people and opportunities you want in your life. High-quality people are drawn to others who demonstrate self-respect and personal standards. They prefer to work with, befriend, and romantically connect with individuals who have their own lives, priorities, and boundaries. Your strategic unavailability signals that you're someone worth knowing, someone whose attention is valuable, and someone who brings quality to relationships rather than just availability. This selective magnetism works in reverse as well. The people who are put off by your boundaries, who react negatively to your unavailability, or who demand constant access to your time, are typically not the people you want in your life anyway. Your boundaries act as a filter that attracts quality relationships while repelling exploitative ones. Over time, your social and professional circles will be populated primarily by people who value and respect you rather than people who seek to use you. The third element of your transformation is the development of what we might call strategic influence. When your availability becomes selective and valuable, when people have to earn your attention, and when your input becomes scarce, your influence and impact actually increase dramatically. People listen more carefully when you speak because they know your words carry weight. Your opinions matter more because they're not constantly volunteered. Your recommendations have more influence because they're carefully considered and selectively offered. This strategic influence extends beyond formal authority or hierarchical power. It's the influence that comes from being seen as someone who thinks before speaking, who chooses their commitments carefully, and who delivers exceptional value when they do engage. This type of influence is more sustainable and more respected than influence that comes from constant availability or people-pleasing. The fourth aspect of your complete transformation is the creation of what successful people call protected progress time. When you're no longer constantly available for other people's priorities, when you've eliminated the low-value activities and relationships that drained your energy, and when you've established clear boundaries around your time, you create substantial periods for focused work on your own most important goals. This protected time is where your biggest breakthroughs will happen. It's where you'll develop the skills that set you apart, create the projects that advance your career, build the relationships that matter most, and make the progress toward your long-term vision that would be impossible if you remained constantly available. This time isn't just more productive, it's exponentially more valuable because it's focused on high-impact activities. The fifth element of your transformation is the development of what we might call authentic confidence. This confidence doesn't come from external validation or from being needed by others. It comes from the internal recognition that you have valuable things to contribute, important goals to pursue, and the wisdom to protect your time and energy for what matters most. This authentic confidence makes you more attractive in all areas of life. It makes you a more appealing romantic partner because you bring your own life and priorities to the relationship rather than making the relationship your entire identity. It makes you a more valuable employee because you focus on high-impact work rather than busy work. It makes you a better friend because you bring quality attention and genuine care to your interactions rather than distracted availability. The sixth aspect of your complete transformation is the emergence of what we might call compound fulfillment. When your time is spent on activities and relationships that align with your values and advance your goals, when you're surrounded by people who respect and appreciate you, and when you have the space to pursue your most important priorities, your overall life satisfaction increases dramatically. This fulfillment compounds over time as the results of your strategic choices accumulate. The skills you develop during your protected time create new opportunities. The quality relationships you build through selective availability provide ongoing support and collaboration. The boundaries you maintain prevent energy drain and preserve your capacity for what matters most. As you step into this complete transformation, Remember that the change you're making isn't temporary or situational. You're not becoming strategically unavailable for a few weeks or months until things calm down. You're adopting a new way of being in the world that recognizes the true value of your time, energy, and attention. This transformation requires ongoing commitment and conscious choice. There will be moments when you're tempted to return to old patterns of constant availability, especially when facing pressure from people who benefited from your previous accessibility. In these moments, remember what you're protecting: your ability to create meaningful value, to build quality relationships, to pursue important goals, and to live a life that reflects your priorities rather than everyone else's demands. The life you'll create through strategic unavailability isn't just different, it's extraordinary. It's a life where your time is respected, your energy is preserved, your goals are pursued, and your relationships are built on mutual value rather than one-sided giving. It's a life where you wake up excited about your own priorities rather than dreading other people's demands. It's a life where you're valued for the quality of what you contribute rather than the quantity of what you provide. This transformation starts today, with the next request you receive, the next boundary you set, and the next time you choose your own priorities over someone else's convenience. Every time you make this choice, you strengthen your new identity and move closer to the life of respect, influence, and fulfillment that strategic unavailability makes possible. The question isn't whether this transformation is possible, it's whether you're ready to claim it. Everything changes when you stop being constantly available. The only question is, are you ready for everything to change?